Okay, so in the previous lab, we built this little topology. I showed you how to ping from one PC to the other. I showed you how the MAC address tables were updated on the switches. I showed you how to change the MAC addresses of the PCs and get a basic topology working. Let's build on this topology by bringing a router into the topology. So what I'll do is bring in a router here, which is a ISR 4331 router. Let's change the name to router 1. As always, make sure that you're following me and trying this yourself. Don't just watch me. Try and build the topology yourself and see if you get similar results to me. So what I'll do is take a copper straight through cable and connect the switch to the router on gigabit 00. So once again, if you're not sure of the interfaces, go to Options, Preferences, Show Port Labels in Logical Workspace, and then you'll see the interfaces. I once again prefer manually adding this, so gigabit 103 and gigabit 000, and then I'll go back to Options, Preferences, and remove Always Show Logical Labels in Workspace. So those are my interfaces between the router and the switch. Okay, so on the router, CLI, router has booted up. I'll say no to bypass the initial configuration dialog, press enter to get started, and I'll type EN to take me to privilege mode. Can you remember how to get to global config mode? Answer is conft or configure terminal. Can you remember how to change the name of the router? Answer is host and then the name you want to make it. Now, end takes me back to privilege mode. Can you remember the superpower command, if you like, to see all the interfaces on the device? It's show IP interface brief. We can see the router has 3 physical interfaces and a virtual interface, VLAN 1 interface. Routers by default have the interfaces shut down. Switches don't. They by default up or enabled. So you have to type conft interface and the interface number, which in this case is gigabit 000. That's the interface that my router is using to connect to the switch. So on that interface, I'll type no shutdown to enable the interface. Interface is now up. And what you'll notice is it's green in packet tracer. On this side, it's orange. It'll go to green in a moment once spanning tree has determined that there are no loops. But that doesn't help me. I need to put an IP address on the interface. So IP address 192.168.1, and I'll use 254 in this example. That will be the IP address of the router on that interface. And let's see if we can ping the switches in my topology, and wait for this to go green before you do that. I had to wait a bit longer actually, but kind of converged. So I got 3 successful pings. Do that again. I can ping switch 1, and can I ping switch 2? There you go, I can. Once again, that first ping is lost because it needs to ARP for the MAC address of the switch. If I type show ARP, I can see the 3 MAC addresses. I can see my own IP address and MAC address, and then I can see the IP address and MAC addresses of the switches in the topology. So that's a very basic network. I've got 2 switches with a router. Routers typically connect us to the internet, so they connect us somewhere else. So that will get us from one network to another network. Switches are typically used within our network, for instance, at our home or small business. And you don't typically have one PC connected to one switch. You'd normally have a whole bunch of PCs connected to a switch. But there you go. We've got a topology. What you're probably going to want to do is configure a default gateway. So on all your devices, you're saying if you don't know where to go, send it to the router. So on the PC, as an example, the default gateway is going to be 192.168.1.254. That is often allocated via DHCP once again, but in our example, I'm doing it manually. So we'll do it the hard way first. So on the PC, ipconfig. Notice default gateway is configured as the router, and the PC should be able to ping the router, which it can. And on PC2, I will do something similar. Let's configure a default gateway. But before we do that, let me show you why you need a default gateway. So on the router, I'm going to introduce the concept of a loopback interface. A loopback interface allows me to create an imaginary network, if you like, on the router in a different subnet. So we have 3 interfaces on the router and VLAN 1. But if I type conft on the router and then I type interface, you'll notice there are different types of interfaces, and one of them is a loopback interface. This is like a virtual interface on the router. So if I type interface loop, notice I can create a whole bunch of loopbacks here, and I'll just create one, and I'll configure an IP address on this loopback of 192.168, let's say 100.254, and set a mask. That interface goes up by default. Type end, show IP interface brief. Notice the loopback interface is configured. The reason to do this, and there are many reasons to do this, but one of the reasons to do this is I don't have to show you how to create another network for this lab. I can just create this little virtual interface that's available on the router. The router, as an example, can ping that loopback interface. So the router can ping that address. But can PC1 and PC2 ping that address? And what about the switches? Will they be able to ping that address? What do you think? So let's go to PC1. PC1 can ping this IP address on the router. So 192.168.1.254. Can it ping 192.168.100.254? Now it's saying destination unreachable. Let's double check in case I've done something wrong. So IP address of the router is that 192.168.100.254. PC1, if everything was configured right, should be able to ping that address, and it's not working because I made a typo. So it's 192.168, not 182. Notice it can ping that address. And the reason why is the PC is saying, okay, this network is not directly connected to me. The only network that's connected to me is 192.168.1.0. And we'll talk about subnetting in a moment. But this is called the network portion of an address because of those 255s in the subnet mask. So this is the network, and this is known as the host portion. That's the only network that I know about. If you ping any other network, like 192.168.100.254, this is a different network. Send it to the default gateway. So it just wants to send it to the default gateway when it doesn't know what to do with the network, when it doesn't know where to send the traffic. It's basically default gateways. I don't know what to do. I'll send it to you. But on PC2, can it ping the router with that address, 192.168.1.254? Yes, it can. But can it ping 100? And the answer is no, because it doesn't have a default gateway configured. So traffic will just time out here. We need to configure a default gateway on the PC so that when it doesn't know where to send the traffic, it sends it to the router with IP address 192.168.1.254. So if I go back to desktop and try that command again, notice it succeeds now because the PC says, okay, I don't know where this network is. I'll send it to the router. And it simply sends it to the router. The switches will also not be able to ping that network because they don't know what to do for unknown networks. So on switch 1, type enable. I need to put in my password. If I ping 192.168.1.254, that works. I can ping the router. But if I try and ping 100, this times out because the switch, once again, doesn't know what to do with the traffic, doesn't have a default gateway configured. So just like on a layer 2 switch such as this, we will configure what's called a IP default gateway. And let's see if I've got the right command. So yes, IP default gateway, and the default gateway is going to be the router. Notice we need to specify the IP address of the router. So now, can switch 1 ping that loopback on the router? Yes, it can. Notice it timed out for a second, but then the ping started succeeding, and that's once again because of ARP. Now, what about switch 2? Can switch 2 ping that address, 192.168.100.254? That fails because I haven't got a default gateway configured. So Control-Shift-6 will kill that ping. Conf-T takes me to global configuration mode. IP default gateway 192.168.1.254. Can we ping 192.168.100.254? Hopefully we can because of the default gateway configuration. And there you go. WR allows me to save my config. Good idea to save your configurations on a regular basis. Okay, so what we've done is add a router to the topology. Now the loopback is just a virtual interface on the router, and I don't want that to confuse you. If I added another network here, or I was trying to go to the internet, what I've shown you now is that your home devices will do the same. You will have a default gateway configured. So on my Mac as an example, so this is my Mac in front of me, I've been allocated an IP address through DHCP. IP address is 192.168.1.116. My subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. And notice in my example, my default gateway or router is 192.168.1.254. This is the device that I'm going to send all traffic to when going to the internet, or if it's not local. So if it's not in my local segment, I'm just going to send it to that router, and hopefully that router will take care of it. Okay, so how are you doing? Did you manage to configure the network? My advice once again is play with networks, build them and try things and see if you can get things to work. That's the best way to learn. Make and break networks.